Let's find some good loading music while we wait for people. Let's go with this one. An Elazid special. Whoops. That's a normal speed.
Elazid.
Oh, that's ironic, so I was just talking about you. Mad irony. We're looking at your composer log while I'm waiting for it to load in. The irony is crazy. Let's put the volume up a little bit. This one's pretty good. You like this one as well, it's nice. We should be back. Focus on your live stream and let YouTube insert ads for you. Dismiss. What the fuck, man? OBS is fine. It should just reconnect me, right? Refresh on this. Does that help? Okay, yeah, sorry about that, guys. I think it should be back on now. Yeah, the Wi-Fi card I've got is pretty bad. So what I'm gonna do is I'll probably look at getting a new one this week. It is but yeah, no, we should be okay now. No, it's not the tabs. I've had more tabs open than this. I actually have, and ironically have, had more tabs open than this. So yeah, sorry everyone. I'll look at getting a new Wi-Fi card this week. To be honest, yeah. Hopefully it can solve it. I'm just gonna talk to someone and see if they got any recommendations for Wi-Fi cards. Because this is pretty bad, the one I've got at the moment, I think. But yeah, no, we can start going to topics. Not enough tabs open. Correct. I want to discuss the main topic of the day. Really, is Jas Athwal, the MP for Ilford South. This guy is yeah, he's a scumbag. He's a scumbag. I'll be honest. So he goes. Yeah, sorry guys. I don't. It was fine. It was fine last week when I streamed on it, and now it's awful. I don't know. It's cut out twice. If it keeps doing it, I'll just lose connection. Yeah, it's just it's just the Wi-Fi card I've got. It just keeps cutting out for some reason. So yeah, I don't know. Right software now. I don't, it should be fine. Like honestly, my internet speed generally is good in my house. Like the Wi-Fi adapter is ant size, so I put it on. Yeah, I think it's the card I'm using. It's just dog shit, I think. Yeah, we'll go on. We'll try and stream for a bit, and if it keeps happening, I'll just leave it. And I'll just stream another day. I'll just try and get a new Wi-Fi card. It's gonna cost me a fortune, but it should be fine. I could make the money back off YouTube in like a month or two, I think at most. So it'd be an okay investment, I think. So yeah, no, it's just frustrating to be honest with you. Not much I can do about it today apart from try and order a new one to see what the people recommend. So going back to another thing that has issues. Jas Athwal, saying that it's unacceptable experiences people may have endured. Saying I'll be reimbursing every tenant that is out of pocket for repairs or renewals. Why would they be out of pocket for repairs when that's your job to fix as the landlord? They will have, I'll be conducting a survey of my tenants so that all issues uncovered, and I'm confident each one is living in secure, and comfortable homes. And this is a guy who says, he's against bad landlords, etc., rogue landlords. We're coming for you, and yet he's one of these rogue landlords. And as kind of No Justice points out, he's so rich he has someone else be a landlord for him. He's an absentee landlord. That's who he is. Being a landlord, in my opinion, is against the Labour Party. It's extracting wealth from people. That's what landlords do. They extract wealth from people, and they use people to pay off mortgages or to essentially fund their lifestyles. The UK's plagued with asset management companies. Complete disaster. Tenants of a Labour MP who lets 15 properties have claimed they were told if you don't like it, leave after complaining about ants and damp in their home. And so the way they've kind of phrased this quote here is a bit deceptive, I think, purely because I don't think he was the one who actually said this. It was someone in one of the asset management companies. Damp is no good for Wi-Fi cards. I don't have damp. I have just trash. Sunday Times have also seen evidence that calls into question whether he had all of the selective property licences required under a scheme he introduced while he was the leader of Redbridge Council. So this is the guy, the former head of the council, who has now become a Labour MP. May not even have all the licenses, all the required things he would need, despite the fact that he helped set the rules. Tenants have described poor conditions at a 7-block flat sandwiched between a butcher shop and a bubble tea cafe on a busy high street he owns. One showed videos of the problems they described. They said repeated complaints made to the property manager who communicated with them over the phone were ignored. And this is where he hired this asset management company. He hired them. Summertime is horrible, the tenants say. There are ants everywhere, adding that after one complaint, the property manager said, if you don't like it, leave. They were told to buy ant-killing powder from a local pound shop and sort out the infestation themselves, so left to their own devices here. None of the residents wish to be named for fear of retaliation. Someone saying they don't want to be evicted. I wasn't aware that people bully here. This is a third world country. One tenant said they were told by the property manager, who they could identify only as a man called Raymond, said that if they were found to be on benefits, they would be evicted. They were not aware their landlord was a Labour MP. I wonder if they were aware their landlord was the head of the Labour Council. A source close to Athwal said, while he had decided not to take tenants on benefits because he believed it would create a conflict of interest with his duties on the council, he was not aware of threats to tenants. Now, I think it's illegal to discriminate against people who are on housing benefits as well. So that's a bit dodgy. And in the fact that he's saying that he wouldn't take people on housing benefits because it's a conflict. You being a landlord in itself is a conflict of interest. You voting on housing legislation is a conflict of interest. You voting on landlord legislation is a conflict of interest. At the back of the property in Southern Kings Ilford, another resident pointed out ants crawling across their kitchen table. The dining area was also where they slept, with 2 small beds taking up most of the space in the room. The bathroom recently cleaned still smelt like damp. And these are things the landlord's meant to clean up. A man knocked on the door and told the occupants not to speak to journalists, adding, there were some guys with the suits. Did you see where they go? Please don't let them in, because they come to put in the newspaper and close the door. The man refused to say who he was and what he was doing at the property. So this is clear. Like, you cannot hire these sorts of people and then try and plead ignorance. It doesn't work. Athwal said the man was a contractor he hired out to carry out urgent remedial works. Now, if this person, say a builder or whatever, they're not going to care about journalists being around. It doesn't make sense. He's arguing he sacked the contractor as well. Like, we have no idea what the hell's going on here. They also said he was completely unaware of alleged conduct of the agency he had hired. This is an absentee landlord. He thought he was paying a good agent to do a good job, and they have not. He has never evicted anybody. People may have left though, because of the way that they were treated. This is complete garbage. His arguments are complete. Honestly, the property license were introduced to monitor and drive up the standards of rented properties in Redbridge. However, an email sent by a member of the council's property license team on August 27th, seen by the Sunday Times, said the council had no record of any license being issued for one of the flats he owned. And this is I believe, a Labour council here. Last night, a source close to Athwell said his properties had been licensed under the previous regime between 2019 and earlier this year. However, the source admitted he had not yet reapplied for a new scheme, but would do so. I wonder how much of this is caused because of the massive media storm around him. Honestly, you know, I just don't get how this man can be a Labour MP. It doesn't make sense. He is against what the Labour Party should be about. The MP, which MP is this? Last night, Labour MP called for Athwell to have the whip removed from him, saying the party should take disciplinary action. Saying the MP added, even if you employ someone to do the work, you have a duty of care as a landlord. I feel like exploitation. It feels like exploitation. It will look like hypocrisy on a grand scale if action isn't taken. The party has got to decide if it's the party of social justice or not. They need to take action. They need to get on with it. Labour's 2024 election manifesto included a pledge to prevent private renters being exploited and discriminated against. MPs must declare on the register of interest if they have rental properties that generates more than 10k a year of income. The party has 44 landlords to which this applies, 11% of its 404 MPs. And so these people all have massive conflicts of interest. Massive conflicts of interest. They should not be allowed to vote on certain legislation. Athwell said, I'm shocked and sickened, blah, 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 blah. No one cares. I don't know if this clip is going to work, because I've just added this one, but...
I don't want to hear another word! You're a disgrace to the game!
This guy, he's a scumbag. About the housing benefit point, he did not take tenants on housing benefit to avoid conflicts of interest. It's against the equality law for them to take instructions to discriminate from a landlord. So if a landlord does not accept benefits, letting agents cannot say it's the landlord's choice to refuse them. But evidently he refuses them. So again, this again is just a massive problem. And this is the situation in the house. You can see someone shot a video of the house. Fire alarm's broken. That's a massive health and safety hazard. There is no defense for this. There is no defense for this. He can apologize and whatever, right? It doesn't matter. There's no defense. There's absolutely nothing he can say to justify these actions. And when we look at, the guy they could have had, Sam Tarry. Sam Tarry was deselected because he went on the picket line and he did say, these are, I think he said something on the lines of, these are the policies that Labour should push or will push, right? He was freelancing. That's what they call it when, when an MP goes off on their own with policy. But the problem is he got I think he faced deselection over that and all sorts of other problems. He was punished by the party over that, despite the fact that what he did isn't as bad as compared to what David Lammy and other people have done, and yet they face no punishment for it. He was deselected more than a year ago for Ilford South. This is in a vote he claims that was rigged, by the way. And the fact that this geezer here, Athwell, could even be a Labour councillor is just a disgrace, to be honest. When if they didn't know who was a landlord, that's some of the worst vetting I've ever seen. And surely they should check on if this man's property is what kind of man is he? What kind of person is he to be running for a party? It doesn't make any sense. This is the stuff you'd see under the Conservative Party. This kind of thing here. And this is when Stan was talking about the best candidates.
3 left-wing candidates now say they have been blocked from standing, and some people are suggesting that is a strategy. Are you blocking left-wing candidates from standing in this election?
No. I've said repeatedly over the last 2 years as we've selected our candidates that I want the highest quality candidates. That's been the position for a very long time. The situation in relation to Diane Abbott is that no decision has been taken to bar her, and we have to remember that she was a trailblazer as an MP. She overcame incredible challenges to achieve what she's achieved in her political career. She literally sort of carved out the path for others to come into politics, and she did all that whilst also being one of the most abused MPs across all political parties. But I've always had the aspiration that we'll have the best quality candidates as we go into this election.
So yeah, the best quality candidates as we go into this election. Now, is the best quality candidate someone who allows ants in their house as the landlord? Is that the best? Is that the best quality candidate? Is it? I don't know. Is this person the best quality candidate? You tell me, guys. Again, the guy we could have had, Sam Tarry, in the seat. Labour MPs must stand in solidarity with the workers engaged. The clue is in the name. No more multi-millionaire MPs with second jobs or multi-property landlords. It's workers versus bosses. Pick a side. He tweeted that back in 2022. The guy they could have had versus the guy they have now. A guy just full of scandal. Under Keir Starmer, Labour MPs have lost their whip for voting to scrap the two-child benefit cap and standing on picket lines of striking workers. We await the disciplinary process starting on the Starmer ally found to be an extreme rogue landlord. And this from Goodall talking about this.
Set of standards that all buy-to-let landlords in his council had to obey, and he himself did not obey it. Now, do you not think that is the height of hypocrisy? And the Labour Party, if this were the Conservative Party, you'd be slamming this guy. You'd be absolutely slamming him. And that, yeah, you are saying, oh no, it's not a huge deal. He's going to just compensate them, but we're just going on as normal. Don't you think it would send a message to buy-to-let landlords who are ripping people off that you, the Labour Party, do not tolerate standards like this, not least from your own MP?
Well, I'm certainly not saying it's okay, and I've just made absolutely clear we don't tolerate standards
then
like
punish
that.
him then.
That's
punish
why.
him.
Hang on a minute. That's why we are legislating with tough measures to tackle these issues, to give tenants those rights, so they don't have to go to the BBC or to anybody else.
The thing is, there are measures in place to deal with this stuff. You should be able to go to your local council and say your landlord is the property you live in is uninhabitable. There are rules for this already in place, but the problem is because the councils have been so hollowed out, they've not done they've not fulfilled these duties. And so what should happen is Labour should be able to fund council property, but also say to councils they have an obligation to deal with landlords like this.
Whether it's a Labour MP or any other landlord, they will have real rights embedded in law, and there'll be legislation and new enforcement and new licensing schemes to back that up. It is not okay, absolutely not okay. What I am saying is that this particular person in question has taken quick action. He was furious about that. I will take him.
He's found quick action because he's been found out. He's been caught. If there's no good argument here. It's either he's an absentee landlord or he's a slumlord landlord. He's a slum landlord. Because if he was not absent, he would have resolved it. And if he knew about these problems and didn't resolve it, he's a slumlord. There's no good answer here.
At his word on that for now, but he has to put that right.
And what are Labour going to do to make sure he does?
And in terms of I think the licensing scheme, there's some transition to a new scheme or something, is my understanding of it. But look, let's be clear. As a Labour government, as a Labour Party, we stand firmly behind the rights of tenants in the private rented sector to live in a safe, in a high quality, in a secure private rented property. And landlords are being put on watch about that. And
put on watch? Where? Where's the legislation you're putting in? Where's the mandate for the councils to make sure councils actually fulfil their obligations? This is a joke. This is an absolute joke. And I've kind of scoured the internet to see if anyone else has really covered this. The Labour goons have not covered this. Shocking, I know. Surprising, I know.
I'm not surprised.
I don't get it, guys. I don't get how this man could be in the Labour Party. Liz Truss, this is one I wanted to cover. We'll cover this on the stream. Considered scrapping all NHS cancer treatments after crashing the economy, a book claims. So Liz Truss considered scrapping cancer treatments on the NHS in a desperate bid to repair damage, according to a new book. So obviously people come up with outlandish claims when it comes to selling books. That is true. Where is the insulation programme? The claim is made by the new biography of Miss Truss by Anthony Selden. Anthony Selden, who's Britain's leading biographer. Why anyone would want to read a biography about Liz Truss is just crazy to me. He talked about the 45 billion unfunded tax cuts. She spent only 49 days in office, which was very turbulent. So yeah, apparently she's had to cancel cancer treatment. Mr. Boyd was to ask, is she being serious? Writes Mr. Anthony. While other aides had said she lost the plot. She's shouting at everyone, we've got to find the money. When we tell her it can't be done, she shouts back, it's not true. The money is there. You go find it. Maybe it's under the sofa. So complete disgrace of another human being here, Liz Truss. So glad she's gone. Complete joke. And kind of relating into the last three about dangerous properties, there are still situations in the UK, because the Tories really did not deal with this at all, where you've got dangerous cladding on flats. We've had another block of flats completely burnt because of the dangerous cladding.
I mean, that's horrific to hear that, and I know that the London Fire Brigade have already started an investigation, and I don't want to preempt that investigation, but we've got to make sure that people have fire escape routes. It's an obligation, it's a legal obligation. I'll be meeting the Health and Safety Executive and the Building Safety Regulators tomorrow to ensure that everybody's aware of their obligations, their legal requirements, and to ensure that people do have that safety route, and to make...
There needs to be some sort of mechanism in the way in terms of punishments for people who do not follow the legal obligations.
Sure that those alarms and those systems that have been put in place are there to make sure that people are safely out of buildings and that they're aware of the fire if one happens and what happens in those circumstances.
The other reality of this is that it is people's lives. We've just met a Polish couple who are supposed to be getting married in Poland in 3 weeks' time. All their documents, their wedding dress that arrived a few days ago is in that flat, and they're uninsured. What can you do?
Well, first of all, we'll be working with the Foreign and Commonwealth Office to look at how we can retrieve documents for people, because we know that's incredibly important. If we can't get them out of the building, is to work with our other departments to support them, working with the local authority to make sure that there is housing and accommodation for people, and they've worked at speed, and incredibly grateful for the work that they've done. But part of this recovery now is to support people in carrying on with their lives after what must have been absolutely horrific. One moment you get out safe, and then you realise you've lost everything, and I can't imagine how that feels for those that are in those circumstances, and we'll do everything we can to support them.
What the residents have told us amounts to breaches of fire safety law. How will you ensure that people are held responsible?
Well, again, I can't preempt the investigation. London Fire Brigade will be carrying out that investigation to see what happened here on the site. I'm very pleased that people responded very quickly. Within 5 minutes, we're on the scene and we're able to get people out of the building. And I know people will be incredibly worried, especially given that this is a building that was having remediation work done for cladding. And I think it's been going far too slowly, the remediation work. We talked about Grenfell. Phase 2 is on the 4th of September, and we still have significant amounts of cladding on buildings, and I will be making sure that I push the Health and Safety Executive and the Building Safety Regulators.
It should be the developers. If this stuff was legal, then the government have to, in my opinion, comp it. If the cladding and stuff like that was illegal, then I think it should be the developers and the owners of the building who have to pay for the remedial works. I'll be honest. This about winter fuel payments.
Much worse in terms of the in-year situation for the country's finances. So we've had to take some really difficult decisions that we wouldn't have wanted to have taken around.
Heard this one under George Osborne.
Things like targeting now the winter fuel payment. And the reason we do that is because the deficit was much higher than anyone thought, and the spending was much higher than anyone thought. If we hadn't taken that action, we'd have seen a run on the pound.
This is complete bogus, because we would have seen this during COVID. The reason why we had that economic crash was because of unfunded tax cuts, massive unfunded tax cuts to the rich that would have done nothing for the economy.
Seen the economy crashing, and
the fact that she's getting away with telling these lies, and the hosts of the channel are saying nothing, is a disgrace.
Pay the heaviest price for that are the poorest and pensioners and those on fixed income. So that stability is really important for the living standards of pensioners and everybody else.
So we're going to hit those pensioners anyways.
Pensioners, all of a sudden, you've taken away a load of money that they get to help with their winter fuel, and that's going to make a tight situation, if they're not on pension credits, even tighter.
No, it is, and it's really been a very difficult decision. It's not one that we would have wanted to take, but to try and find in-year savings, so savings this year, this financial year, is an incredibly difficult thing to do, which we had to do. And so means testing the winter fuel payment is something... Again,
means testing has a cost, because you need someone, a bureaucrat, to look at the paperwork and documents and things like that to issue if someone's successful or not. Means testing has a cost.
We've had to consider, but let's just be clear that because of our commitment to the triple lock, which means that pensioners, the state pension will increase by either inflation or average earnings or 2%, whichever is the highest, pensioners are going to see the state pension increase by hundreds, possibly thousands of pounds over the course of this Parliament, and they will be better off.
I mean, it's clearly been a huge issue for a lot of people. A lot of Labour MPs have been telling the BBC that their inboxes are full from constituents about the winter fuel payments. Do you think there's any measures that are going to be introduced that might lessen the impact as we head towards winter?
Well, there are a few things. We want pensioners who are entitled to pensioner credit to apply for that and explore that, and there'll be
From what I've seen, the application for pension credit is like 20 pages. So how do you expect old people to be able to do the paperwork for that? It's just a joke. There was more stuff I was going to talk in relation to that, actually, that story. So we're gonna I'll have to find those tabs somewhere, so I'll push this off to the edge until I find it. We're going to listen to some Robert Jenrick, who wants to be the next head of the Conservative Party.
Let nobody doubt that. We are a great country. We rarely say this because it's not in our British nature to be boastful.
What, bro? What? You guys talk about being world beating all the time. What?
But it does need repeating from time to time, doesn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you tell a lie enough, it becomes the truth, right?
Especially when times are tough.
And why are times so tough? Who was in government last? Not long ago, this year? About 4 months ago?
Crises distort our perspective. Because there is plenty to be optimistic about, even if our party is in need of some hard truths. The United Kingdom's contribution to the world isn't flawless. No country's is. But it is unparalleled.
I don't know about that. I would say other countries are doing far more to support global efforts than we are.
In the 17th century, we pioneered the political system, parliamentary democracy, that keeps national peace. And in the 18th and the 19th...
I mean, our parliamentary system is incredibly flawed. Our voting system is incredibly flawed. The fact that it's hundreds of years old, it probably does need to be looked at.
19th century, we forged the economic system, a set of laws and institutions and cultural beliefs that create genuine wealth here and across the world. That is why, unlike almost every other country on earth, on these isles, it has been over the last 300 years that the only revolution that we created was the Industrial Revolution.
I mean, it just shows that, you know, countries that have had revolutions really need them. I mean, France was better off for it. Russia, you could argue, weren't better off for it because that's when you had basically a new kind of dictatorship take over. But then again, they were ran by monarchs anyways. Most of the revolutions were against monarchies. So again, it's not really the strongest argument.
Greatness is not, though. It is not just past.
Also, there was a revolt against the king who was beheaded, I believe, anyway. So yeah, you know, it's a bit deceptive, that one.
Our greatness is present. A while ago, we were inventing the steam engine, the modern railway. We were inventing penicillin. Today, we're at the forefront of AI, of life sciences, of new
I don't think we're at the forefront of AI. I think most other countries have got us wiped down when it comes to AI and robotics.
Technologies of biomedicine. 80 years ago, British soldiers were fighting to liberate Europe from tyranny. Today, British soldiers are training Ukrainian troops.
I really don't get the point of that. It was, oh yeah, 100 years ago we did this, 200 years ago that we did that. We're so cool, aren't we? And it's like, dude, like everyone, well, I guess everyone, most of the people listening in the audience would not have been around 80 years ago. They would not care. They do not care. This about austerity from Goodall.
Course, which ran saying that there would be no return to austerity. And yet, if one looks at the plans that are being laid out so far by Rachel Reeves, and certainly the tenor and rhetoric and tone of what Keir Starmer was saying earlier in the week, it's hard to escape the conclusion that we could be heading to an era, if not quite a full-blown, full-flat austerity, then certainly a semi-skimmed version of it. And I think that is potentially...
This kind of goes out to all of the people who kept saying, you know, Labour aren't going to do austerity. When you listen to what they're actually saying, and you look at some of the stuff they're actually doing when it comes to things like winter fuel payments, how can you argue it's not austerity? You know, if you want to argue, oh, they're giving, you know, workers an above current inflationary pay rise, that's fine. But that doesn't mean it's what they're not committing to overall isn't austerity. What we're seeing is below inflation, budgetary cuts and things like that. And if it's the case you want to argue on a technicality, it's not austerity. Under David Cameron, we had the bottom rate of tax increase. They increased the threshold and they cut the top tax rate from 50% to 45%. So you can argue that also is not austerity. I don't get it.
Potentially dangerous or problematic for Keir Starmer and the Labour government for a few reasons. One is that you try and do the George Osborne strategy of blaming the last lot and saying austerity is necessary without the support of the right wing.
Let's also remember, despite Cameron winning that election in 2015, he was also deeply unpopular.
Press difficult. That's something George Osborne and David Cameron had that Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves certainly won't have. But more importantly, far more importantly, in fairness to Osborne, whatever you think about austerity, in fairness to him and Cameron, they ran on it in 2010. They went into the general election, they said, this is something we're going to do, not just because we believe it is necessary, and this is the second part, not just because we believe it was necessary, but because we actually believe, to some extent, that it is a good thing, that it is our theory of change. We think that if we reduce public spending, the private sector will get bigger because the public sector will get smaller, and then our economy will be fitter, leaner, better. It was their theory of change. You might disagree with it, and personally speaking, there's lots of things I disagree with it about, but it was nonetheless a theory of change. It was their vision, not only for how things were going to get worse in the short term, but actually how things would get better ultimately. Keir Starmer and Labour aren't saying that. They're saying they're going to have to make these decisions. But then what's plan B? And I think that's what Labour MPs increasingly going to want to hear.
Yeah, what is the plan after? What are you going to do after you do this austerity budget? What's next? And I think that's a valid concern to have. Even though we heard under Angela Rayner saying we're not having more austerity, not a chance. We're going back to business as usual. Clearly, the back to business as usual is austerity. So yeah, it just goes to show you that it's a joke. This whole thing is a joke. Rachel Reeves has begun slashing billions from education and healthcare spending ahead of harsh budget cuts. Expected to be a painful budget. Reeves is making cuts that will really scrape the bone. She said public spending is not sustainable. As she told the government. The Chancellor's, these are quotes that someone's given. Really scrape the bone in Whitehall, painful, etc. I mean, this is a complete joke. Education needs more money. You have more teachers leaving. Giving them a salary increase is good, but if they're given more work to do, they're going to leave. On the back of the OBRs publishing a paper saying the case for Rachel Reeves to embark on public investment, saying it says investing 1% of GDP will raise output by 0.5%, increasing to 2.5% in the long term, paving way for borrowing to invest. This is what the OBR are saying about this. That you would see short term. You will see output of potentially 0.5, but going up to 2.5, which is over double the initial investment. In business, they talk about investing, borrowing to invest. In government, they talk about budget cuts. Why can't we borrow money to invest in the economy, into people? And this is that David Cameron speech.
I came into politics because I love this country. I think its best days still lie ahead, and I believe deeply in public service.
I've heard this from you could literally, I think this sounds very similar to Starmer.
And I think the service our country needs right now is to face up to our really big challenges, to confront our problems, to take difficult decisions, to lead people through those difficult decisions so that together we can reach better times ahead.
Yeah, and it's true, at least Cameron was more honest, not about the better times bit, but about the austerity bit. He was honest about it. I want to discuss actually just there's a lot of bouncing around different stories here, saying my Gaza ceasefire vote sped up NHS care. She's another one. She's a complete fraud. I wish she could have been voted out. Although the guy who was trying to trying to compete against her was a scumbag from what I've heard as well. She was saying that she was having trouble breathing. My lips had gone blue and I couldn't breathe. She recalled explaining that she'd sought urgent treatment at A&E. And so, yeah, she says it was undoubtedly she got seen quicker for two reasons. I got through because of who I am. Also, the doctor who saw me was Palestinian, as it turns out. Almost all the doctors in Birmingham seem to be. While in opposition, she voted for a ceasefire. And she claims that because she voted for a ceasefire, she got seen quicker. Even though some of the medical professionals have been saying, like, the reason she got seen quicker is because she's having breathing problems. I don't know what the hell she's thinking, I'll be honest.
Angela.
Oh, this was another one I wanted to discuss. So, The Civil Service Commission has launched an investigation into the appointment of some Labour donors to government positions. So there's alleged potential corruption here. And this from the Green Party during the election.
Angela says that Keir has changed the Labour Party. And she's right. He's changed them into the Conservatives.
That is one of the strongest statements I've ever seen, considering she's right there. There was an addition to this story. I just need to find the other bit. There it is there. You've got your Baroness Gisela Stewart here writing to writing about this investigation, saying, Dame Siobhan MacDonald has written to Gisela Stewart a letter saying, I'm writing following your announcement that Civil Service Commission will conduct a short review into appointments for the civil service. You've stated the review appointments made by exception to the recruitment principles, blah, blah, blah. Essentially, she's mad that there's an investigation into corruption and saying, how come you didn't do the Tories as well? Which is a complete joke, to be honest with you. This is the worst, this is the worst defence I've ever seen for these kind of statements. Let's go drag this one back. Oh, this is kind of a mess, guys. Where's the bloody... This is what I wanted here. So this is about the smoking ban and how mad the one Tory's over it.
Now the beginning to...
This is Esther McVeigh. Defends using a Holocaust analogy when criticising a smoking ban.
Remove freedoms. So they've started off removing from nearly 10 million pensioners their winter fuel allowance. No mandate for that. They're now looking at, as I said, removing freedoms, starting with smoking there. They're also taking planning permission changes, confiscation of people's land. And then what you see him trying to do now is like removing pictures. That's like removal of history. I'm afraid this is not a Labour government. This is a very extreme socialist government.
I hate when they call the Labour Party socialists. I'm like, I wish. I wish.
And really, Keir Starmer should be doing more important things.
This is a Conservative Party, by the way, guys, who during the last Parliament, the end of the last Parliament, tried to get through a smoking ban.
Than taking away people's freedoms.
I get what you're saying. I really do, Esther. But you can't honestly say that the way they're treating pensioners is how they treated communists, or the way they're treating smokers.
No. You're falling into the same trap, Nick.
But that's how the poem spans out, Esther.
No. This is about a parable.
She literally, posted the poem about they came for the communists, and I said nothing.
This is a parable, and it's about how people can slowly, incrementally remove freedoms. It's known as an analogy.
Just a complete joke. And if you want to hear some actual analysis on the smoking ban, here's Stephen Flynn.
Per year in Scotland as a result of smoking, that number is far too hard, and it does indeed put significant pressure.
It's some of the worst audio I've ever heard in my life.
Upon our NHS, and I think that's a fair and reasonable starting point for
Can you guys hear this okay?
any discussion that we have in relation to smoking bans. I personally see what the Labour Party are doing as an attempt to deflect, because they know that the public are very much focused on the fact that the first 100 days or so in office of this Labour Party appears to be doom and gloom, that things are going to get worse, and they don't want people talking about austerity. So what they are doing is suggesting that people in some way shouldn't be able to smoke outside. It appears to be using a hammer to crack a nut when it comes to some of the challenges which face the NHS and which face those individuals who...
I think he's right about the Labour Party using it as a distraction, because from what I've seen, there are a lot more people discussing the smoking ban and kind of making jokes and stuff about it, rather than talking about the budget that's coming up.
Do indeed smoke, but ultimately this is a smoke screen from the bigger issues of the day, which is the austerity agenda that the Labour Party are pushing, and we shouldn't allow ourselves to fall into that particular trap, and we should instead be focusing on the biggest issues, because it's those biggest issues which are going to impact everyday lives of people right across not just Scotland but the UK, and we need to be holding the Labour government.
That I agree with. I think it is a smokescreen, I'll be honest. I do agree with him on that. I did want to discuss the case for a land tax.
Proposed, Caroline said, a land value tax that would raise money from landowners and owners of large properties based on the value of the land they occupy. Right, this one is a serious idea, Dan, no?
Yeah, I mean, not only is it easily the best of the ideas we've just gone through. It's better than any tax proposal by any politician in the general election, or indeed any general election I can recall. So, yeah, and why? Land is important, particularly in the UK, but current land taxes are a disaster. Council taxes mean a Blackpool semi pays more in council tax than a Mayfair penthouse. Business rates are harming the high street. Stamp duty stops people moving. These taxes are unfair, but worse than that, they're anti-growth. So we could sweep them all away, replacing them with a tax on the undeveloped value of land, so you're incentivising development.
So let's be clear: you're taxing the value of the land, not the value of the whatever you're doing with it. So you've got a good incentive to use that land very, very well, so that you don't just pay a lot of tax on a piece of land that isn't being used.
Exactly, and economists love this, whether we're talking about the leftists at the Resolution Foundation, the right-wing libertarians at the Adam Smith Institute. There's pretty much an economic consensus that it's a great tax. But
what?
Politicians are terrified of it, because it means it would be a big tax change. Most people would win, but there would be people in large houses on, maybe they're retired, maybe they were lucky in the past and now have a lower income, and it would be a problem for them.
And they wouldn't necessarily, we should say, they wouldn't necessarily have the cash in the bank to pay the tax each year. You have a lot of people who may own a piece of land, it appreciated under their watch, but they haven't had to fork out the money. I mean, to say to them suddenly you've got to find a cheque of £3,000 every 6 months would probably be a very difficult burden for them.
Well, they would say they are asset rich and cash poor, but I'm afraid the proper term for someone who's asset rich is rich. If you're
It's true, to be fair. And, you know, you're not going to buy land if you know there's a potential tax on. But the government could say it's like, if the land is dormant for like a year or whatever, if there's no work going on it, then you face the land tax. You know, there are ways to then people would still buy land for like construction purposes or whatever. And this from the IFS.
Let's talk about the disaster that is the current taxation system for housing and what we should do to sort that out, because you could. One of the things Rachel Reeves will also be thinking about, or will be asking her officials, is what can you do to the tax system to improve economic efficiency and growth? One answer to that is, just start the taxation of housing all over again. But Dan, you wanted to come in on this.
Let's say, as you probably do, Paul, you live in a £100 million penthouse.
Oh, absolutely.
In the West End. How much council tax do you pay on that? £1,946.32. Let's say that I live in a house in Blackpool that is a terraced house. It's an exactly average house in Blackpool. How much council tax do I pay? £2,783. A terraced house in Blackpool pays significantly more council tax than a £100 million penthouse in the West End.
I think that's a joke, to be honest. I think this system does need reforming. I can't imagine the Labour government will do it, to be honest. And this is Grace Blakely kind of talking in a similar vein.
Let's just think about the astonishing intergenerational unfairness that is the UK housing market.
Council tax and the way it's calculated is so outdated because it's based on valuations from back in the 1990s. I think everyone pretty much agrees it doesn't work, don't they?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think this is one of those taxes that everyone is like, this needs reform, this needs to be changed. Now, people are pretty put off trying to change it based on the fact that the last person who tried to do a big transformation in council tax was, of course, Margaret Thatcher with the poll tax, and that basically ended her political career. But everyone agrees that it's completely broken. So I think
if you phrase this in the right way and you say to people like, look, you're paying more in council tax than someone who owns a multi-million pound property, I think people will be okay with it, as long as you're not punishing kind of lower and middle earners.
I think that this proposal that we're now hearing about from Labour, it's kind of being muttered about and being leaked, that they might introduce a 0.5% tax on the value of the property per year, basically.
We've just done some sums on that, haven't we? So if you've got like a 350 grand house, that would be £1,750 a year. Now, that doesn't sound too dissimilar for what you would pay in council tax already for that kind of house. However, if your house is worth £2 million, that is 10 grand a year. And there'll be people listening to this who are suddenly, oh my God, that could be us. There'll be other people going, this is great, because that feels much fair.
If you're a person who's got prospects and is going to work in an industry that pays well, like really well, like beyond 100k, then I get it. If you're not, and you're kind of upset by these proposals, you're a bit of a clown.
Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of really good arguments for this, and then there are some things that will need to be managed, right? So some really good arguments for it. Firstly, lots of people who are very, very wealthy have lots of very effective, often completely legal ways of avoiding tax. And it's easy to do that when you're able to shift the kind of income that you have from, different places. Say it's coming from a limited company rather than your income, whatever, put it in different trusts or, all sorts of different ways you can kind of legally avoid tax. This is much, much harder to avoid. And we know that tax avoidance is a really big problem at the upper end of the income spectrum. So it does cut into that problem of tax avoidance and evasion, particularly because there are a lot of people as well who just stick money in property. There's actually a big problem of people laundering money through London property. And we, saw this with Russian money laundering in the wake of the war in Ukraine as well. This suddenly became a political hot button when actually it's been a problem for a really long time. And crucially, there's lots of arguments about an old person living in a very valuable house, and that would be really unfair. Let's just think about the astonishing intergenerational unfairness that is the UK housing market. If you bought a house before the bubble, in the 1970s, you could have bought a house for like 10 grand that's now worth several £100,000. You've done absolutely nothing to earn that increase. It's all been because we had this massive boom in international financial markets, tons of money being pumped into the housing market, and then more recently, the creation of lots more money through central bank money.
One of the ways you can avoid kind of pensioners being hit by this is if you say, if you earn not just a single property worth a certain amount. If you earn multiple properties worth a certain amount, say you say if your house is worth more than 500k for example, then you get hit with the this wealth tax. For example, like that's something you can do. And then if someone owns multiple properties that are worth say 100k and it equals 500k, then you can hit them with this kind of property tax. I think that would be effective.
Creation that has again artificially boosted financial markets and housing markets. It's so unfair. And then if you didn't manage to get on that bandwagon at the right time, you're left with the wreckage of a housing crisis, which means that you can't afford to purchase a house because the average house is worth so much more than the average income, and it's very hard to get a mortgage and all this different sorts of stuff. So there is this like fundamental intergenerational unfairness.
That is true, to be fair. To argue that it's unfair for pensioners, it's also, I think, more unfair for younger people. And society is fundamentally unfair, but I guess we have to choose who it's unfair for. I think that's one of the questions.
And also a fundamental unfairness of the fact that this is wealth that has been accrued, not based on hard work and effort, but basically just based on a big, international housing bubble, and also the action of governments that worked to make it even bigger than.
And also the fact that you bought houses in the south of England rather than the north of England. That's one of the key things here. Switching gears, Labour has rejected to join the Erasmus scheme. I don't know why they would suddenly do that. It's very strange, especially for the people who kept saying Labour are going to bring back certain things. Clearly that's not the case. This caller supporting Brexit, even though it's been a disaster.
I did vote for Brexit, and it actually has affected me quite badly, but I still would vote it again because I still believe in the principle of it.
Even though you're suffering as a result of it?
100%.
I think the furlough scheme did have massive amounts of problems. 2 houses on my road were bought from new for £300 and another for £800. This was pre-1900 date. Well, they'd be worth a lot now. It's a big investment for those people from the 1900s.
Isn't that just an obvious case of cutting off your nose to spite your face?
Well, I think it's going to take... The problem is we were in the EU for 50 years. We ain't going to fix it in 6 months. It's going to take time.
It's not. It's been years, though. It's been several years since we left.
Not really. Well, several years. But I'll give you another example. I went to business to Amsterdam the other day. We were separated into two queues, Europe and the rest of the world. And obviously I joined the Europe queue on the basis we're a European. I'm like, no, you're not a European. You're the rest of the world. I said, no. We're in the EU. We're not in the EU, but we are in Europe.
But most places you go, the queue is EU or non-EU. And I've had to, God knows how many times I've had to queue for God knows how long Because we left. I mean, there are obvious downsides to leaving. Are there any upsides yet?
Well, yes, there are.
Yeah.
No, we're in the EU. We're not in the EU, but we are in Europe.
That's one of the things that people don't get. They think we weren't leaving the EU. We weren't leaving Europe, but we're leaving the EU, which is true. But the problem is, most countries are part of the EU or part of the EEA. Most European countries are. So wherever you go in Europe, you're going to be in the non-EU queue, the non-EEA queue. I don't get why that's so hard for them to understand.
What 15 billion?
Well, the 15 billion annual fee that we were paying to the EU, we're now no longer paying. It's equivalent to.
Oh my God! I can't believe people still push this.
Keir Starmer's black hole. Imagine black hole times 2.
But the economic impact of leaving is even bigger, isn't it?
I don't know.
40 billion is the suggestion.
Has that been proved?
That's the suggestion. I think
so. 40 billion versus 15 billion. Waiting longer in airport queues. Let's also not forget that we're not even getting that. I think the majority of that 15 billion, most of that money's gone because of our commitments to the EU budget, but also liabilities such as pensions and things like that. Like this idea of 15 billion saved is a complete joke, to be honest.
It was LSE that said that.
I wish I had the numbers, Mason. What do they mean?
But look, our economy is growing faster than Germany. How is that so? That can't be right.
Since we left, Chris, we've got. If you want to talk about the economics, we've got poorer. We left. We're going through the biggest fall in living standards since records began right now.
And also, they cherry pick Germany. Right, we're doing worse than France, worse than Italy, worse than Spain. Worse than most of the EU. I think we're doing worse than. This idea that just because we're beating Germany, like Germany's economy is very different. They're also being strained massively because of their dependence on Russian gas and energy. Just because we're doing better than Germany, cool. Let's talk about all the other countries we're doing worse than.
People don't feel better off.
The same with the Germans. They're in the EU. We're the fastest growing. Why it's not bad.
We literally, right, when you look at the G7, because I've just looked at it recently, we're doing the second worst in the G7. This idea that just because we're beating Germany, who cares?
That bad. I've got a business.
We do. You're right, Roshan. We do need an economic assessment.
Trading with Europe, it's not that bad.
You just told me it's harming you.
It is harming me in some ways, but it's not so bad. There are other ways it's got better.
But it's not so bad wasn't on the side of a bus, was it? We were promised sunlit uplands. This was going to transform our nation into global Britain. And now it's become, it's not that bad.
I did.
Yeah, sure, it's changed to, guys, it's not that bad. It's a complete joke, to be honest with you. This guy here is not Kentish. I think that's Kentish. The guy calling in is a nut job. I'll be honest, complete nut job. Do not get what bro was talking about. Is my soundboard not working? You hate to see it. Strange. Oh, anyways. You move.
We don't just sit back.
Oh, it's just really far behind my stream, I think it's working. Oh well, I won't keep pressing buttons. This talking about. Actually, I'm not sure what the context of this clip was. Let's have a listen to this.
Is cronyism bad under Conservative?
This is about corruption within the Labour Party.
Government, but okay under a Labour government.
Cronyism is something which Keir Starmer has made very clear he wants to drive out of government. For him,
he's not doing a good job so far, is he?
Well, for him, process and procedure is absolutely critical. And I think, as he said that this morning at his press conference, he made very clear how important process and procedure is to him. And I think anyone who knows him, anyone who's listened to him and what he's had to say over the last few years knows how important that is to him. And that's
I thought you said you were going to be better than the Conservatives. Things were going to be different, you said.
Yes, and Keir Starmer has started driving that change by making sure that we are a government of service, that we're focused on the needs of the British people, rather than internal party politics or other distractions.
But you're giving civil service jobs, you have been giving civil service jobs to Labour supporters and Labour donors.
Well, there are clear processes and procedures in place which govern those appointments, and they need to be followed, but no one can be in any doubt how important this is to the Prime Minister.
There's literally an investigation over potential corruption here.
It's absolutely critical for him to make sure that we restore trust in politics and that we have processes in place that are followed.
Right. In opposition, Keir Starmer accused the Tory party of giving their supporters jobs for their mates. He promised to restore standards in public life with a total crackdown on cronyism. You've given jobs to Labour supporters or donors in the civil service, which is supposed to be impartial. You've given a security pass to the Labour peer who paid for Keir Starmer's spectacles and chinos during the election campaign. That is the definition of cronyism, isn't it?
Well, look, firstly, I'm not going to comment on individual cases.
Why not?
Because I'm not going to... It's not
We've all read about them.
It's not appropriate for me to comment on the process that was gone through in individual cases.
How does it smell, do you think? Does it pass the sniff test?
What I can say more generally about this is that people who are long-term...
I think eventually Labour are going to stop doing interviews with Victoria Derbyshire, I'll be honest. Especially this guy. This guy's got it the worst.
Involved in a political party and support a political party, that should not prohibit them from then helping the party in government. You know, that should not exclude them from being able to do that.
It's hard to see you making that argument if it was a Tory supporter or donor being given a job in the heart of government.
If you have someone, look, without commenting on the specifics, you mentioned Lord Ali, who I know has been a long-term contributor to the Labour Party and to our work in opposition and to try and get us into government. You know, so I know that someone like him has been long-term part of the project.
You just said you don't want to comment on individual cases, but here you are commenting on an individual case.
To trying to get a Labour government.
So what?
But I don't want to, but without getting into the specific
Well, you
details.
just have. So what? If it's been a long-term support...
That makes it worse. That makes it worse. It makes it look more corrupt.
...of the Labour project.
That shouldn't exclude someone from helping us in government.
He's a donor. That's the problem. It doesn't matter if he's a supporter. He's giving financial money.
Can I read you this email from one of our viewers? It's from a woman who says she's very concerned and extremely distressed on behalf of her dad about your government's decision to cut the winter fuel payments to pensioners. She says, my father is almost 80. He receives the state pension but just misses out on the requirement for pension credit. My father's worked for the NHS diligently for years, paid his taxes and even selflessly did some part-time work for the NHS during the COVID pandemic. The winter fuel payments were a lifeline for him these past years when the cost of living went up, and they helped him get by during the winter. Where is the justice or humanity in taking away this lifeline for my father?
Well, that's obviously a very difficult situation, and I can understand that the daughter of the gentleman in question wants to raise her concerns, and you know it's important that we hear them. But I think there's no getting away from the fact that we are going to have to take difficult decisions.
Well, that's all right then, guys. We have to make difficult decisions. Screw this guy who, went back to work for the NHS during the pandemic. Forget about this guy. We got difficult decisions to make, guys. Sorry, Grandpa. You're not going to be able to afford to heat your house this year.
Not as difficult as a pensioner might have to make this winter when they choose between heating and eating.
We're making sure we protect the triple lock for pensioners, and so that will protect the state pension.
That's not going to help. That's not going to help this woman's dad.
If we have a situation where we don't have secure public finances, if we haven't got the public finances back on a better footing, that will impact pensioners along with...
Again, you can increase taxes. You have things that you can do. You have tools, you have measures at your disposal here that you can use to improve the public finances, to fund all of these things. We've just gone over some of that stuff.
With everyone else.
So what would your advice be to this 80-year-old who just misses out on the eligibility for pension credit when it comes to paying his energy bills this winter?
Well, look, I'm not going to give advice for a specific person without...
Why not?
No, because I don't want to get into specifics of one person and
I'm
their
sure
situation.
you don't, but this is exactly the effect your government's policy is having on specific individuals.
What I would say to them...
This is brutal.
What I would say to the gentleman and his daughter is that I realise that the decision we've taken is a difficult one.
So can you guys see, what's the difference between this and the stuff David Cameron, George Osborne and that lot were saying about austerity and budget cuts?
I realise that it's a tough choice that we've had to take. I realise that it will have an impact.
I'm sorry, it's going to have an impact on you. Apologies for that. It's a complete disgrace, but it's a complete joke, to be honest. This last one from Ollie Dugmore.
I think it was underwhelming, unimpressive, dishonest.
Get off the fence, Ollie, why don't you?
I think if you're going to stand on a platform of change, it's basically the only word you heard from his lips over the course of the general election campaign, and as Nick said, then stand on essentially a George Osborne speech. It's not change. It's 14 years. It's extraordinary, the economic consensus established under the coalition government and then David Cameron's Tory party, the way that it's continued through. I don't necessarily think I would have expected a Labour government to adhere to the same economic thinking that they've apparently spent the last 14 years bemoaning.
If Keir Starmer was sitting here right now, he might say, but look at the public sector pay rises we have just given above inflation in order to make sure we retain...
Above current levels of inflation, it doesn't make up for what the Tories did.
...those staff and end the strikes.
Yeah, it's really peculiar.
That is a change.
Yeah, no, absolutely is. And the gap between the rhetoric and the actual action of the Labour government I find quite interesting. So when those pay rises came into force, it was the same day that Reeves gave that speech in the Commons before the recess. And
29th of July.
And what was the language she was employing, right? It's tough decisions, household budget. She barely mentioned the public sector pay rises. And I find it quite peculiar that on the one hand, whilst they're doing this actually relatively progressive thing, and by the way, I reject the politics that says you have to choose between the pensioners and the workers and the public sector pay rises. I don't believe in playing voters or parts of the electorate off each other in that way. But it's really interesting, their action and the difference between what they're saying when they're speaking publicly. And I don't know where that comes from, whether it's media management, whether it's just...
I wonder if they're saying that because, they would have to try and justify... If they put the two together, they would have to justify the pay rises versus the stuff they're doing to pensioners. I think that's why they've done it. But, this Labour government, unless they improve people's living standards and also make people feel like things have been improved, they're not going to get very far. I can't see their majority lasting that long in the next Parliament. I'll be honest. Danny Blanchard said fiscal rules. I mean, it is made up nonsense. I've been following Danny Blanchard a lot since I covered him. Some of his tweets last week. It's quite interesting. It's quite interesting actually, the stuff he's been saying. And he's right. Fiscal rules for the most part are nonsense. The idea that we have to have a debt to GDP ratio under 100% is nonsense. We've covered that France has a higher debt to GDP ratio, and the only way to really grow the economy and start cutting down the debt and the deficit is to invest. How do you grow a business? Sometimes you have to borrow to invest so you can expand, and that's the situation that the country's in now. Like, we desperately need more infrastructure projects, more housing, things like that, etc., and we're just not getting it. If that 38 billion they wasted on test and trace, if that money was invested into the economy properly, the amount of growth we would have seen would have been astronomical. We would have seen so many potential infrastructure projects, pay increases, things like that being done. It would have grown the economy. You could have expanded the NHS with that money. You could have actually committed to building HS2 properly, etc. Like, there are so many things, good things they could have done off the back of that would have grown the economy, but they chose not to. They always chose to waste it on test and trace, on Serco, and those sorts of people. It was corruption of the highest order. If that money was invested into the economy, we would be in a much better position. But anyways, guys, that's me done for the day. I've got loads of videos I've got to actually record and stuff. So I'm going to leave it there. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe. Support the channel on Patreon if you can. And hopefully I will see you in the next one. See you, chump. Is my soundboard actually not working? Oh, no, it is. See you, chump.